has to do with our next guest. Maayan Ziv is the creator of AccessNow, and she joins us right now on 610 CKTB. Maayan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us today to talk about AccessNow, and it's all about accessibility because you live your life in a wheelchair.
Exactly.
Have you always lived your life in a wheelchair?
Yeah, since I was born, I've been using a wheelchair to kind of navigate my world.
And like everybody else with mobility issues, you find accessibility isn't consistent, and sometimes it's a big problem.
Absolutely. Although some places are accessible, there are many places that are not. And trying to determine which ones are from the ones that are not can be a real hassle.
And that's where AccessNow comes in. I want to touch on that in just a second, but off the air here in the hallways, I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I was mentioning that you were coming up on the program, and we started to talk about accessibility laws. And we thought that maybe in, 3 years' time, by 2018, all public facilities need to be accessible, but we have no idea. I imagine you do know. Do you know what the law is?
Sure, yeah. There's a law in Ontario that states that by 2025, everything should be fully accessible. That law was passed 25 years ago, and here we are 10 years past that mark, and how much improvement have we actually seen? So we're 10 years to the finish line to create full access in Ontario, and a big inspiration for me in actually building AccessNow was to kind of get this process moving.
Now, how much improvement have you seen in the last 15 years? I see all new builds being accessible, but I don't know that every business is retrofitting their facilities.
Right, yeah. So all the new buildings that pop up today are supposed to be fully accessible. And then in addressing all the places that are not yet accessible, it's kind of a challenge in that it's hard to really find those locations because the government really hasn't put into place any enforcement that would actually make those locations have to abide by the law. So they're kind of encouraged to do so, but there hasn't really been any action to actually make these locations do their duty.
And I imagine we are going to see a big swell of retrofitting projects in the next 10 years as 2025 grows nearer.
Yes, I would hope so.
AccessNow, it's an app, right? That's what you've created, an app?
Yeah, it's a web app.
So web app meaning it's available on a PC with an internet connection, or is it available for smartphones and Apple products and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's AccessNow.ca. You go to the website. You could use it on a computer. You could use it on a tablet. You could use it on a phone. It's really friendly to all devices. Okay,
I'm sure you've described it a million times, so tell our audience what AccessNow is.
Absolutely. AccessNow is a web app that uses crowdsourcing to collect and share information on the accessibility of places. So for me, using the wheelchair, I want to know, is the location that I'm going to accessible? I could use the app to search for that specific place, and if someone has added information, it'll be there. The coolest part for me about the project is that we are actually building a community of people who are contributing to accessibility information. So anyone who wants to can go to AccessNow and actually add new places and rate them based on accessibility.
And that's important that anybody can go. You don't have to have mobility issues. You can subscribe and start contributing to the database.
Exactly, and that's really the power of the project, that it's not just focusing on people with disabilities, although that is a large part of it. Anyone can contribute, and at some point in your life, you are probably going to be that person who needs accessibility.
Now, Maayan, answer me this. Do you know of a similar app operating anywhere else in the world?
So there are a couple of initiatives kind of in the same stage that AccessNow is at, trying to kind of come up with this idea of sharing accessibility information. Everyone's kind of doing it in their own way, and there hasn't really yet been any kind of certification or proper guideline that lets people know exactly if it's going to be accessible for them. What we tried to do with AccessNow is create a system in which people could add their own information, and then others could determine for themselves whether it really works for them or not. If there is an accessible washroom there, for example, or if there is an elevator, you could decide if that place was accessible for you or not.
Maayan, give us an example of what you go through in your life when somebody calls you up or sends you a text and says, hey, want to meet at such and such a place. What immediately goes through your mind?
Yeah, so the first question I ask when I go anywhere is it going to be accessible? That's before, is the service good or how's the lighting? I need to know if it's going to be wheelchair accessible for me before anything else. So usually what I have to do is call the place ahead of time, try and get someone on the phone. Often the person who I get on the phone, if I'm lucky, they don't usually know the answer to my question. They're kind of guessing. They're not really sure. And there's come so many times where I actually show up at a location thinking it's accessible and then determining on the spot last minute it's actually not. And then I'm stuck in situations trying to figure out access solutions. Often I've just got to turn around and basically go home, which really, really sucks.
Well, it does really suck, and what sucks is without an app like yours, there could be somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with a mobility issue half an hour after you've left that shows up at the exact same place, and they don't know.
Yeah.
So that's the idea of Access Now is once that happens to you, you can now go in the database and let people know, hey, look, if you're in a wheelchair, you won't be able to access such and such a restaurant or such and such a mall or even public spaces, right? That's part of Access Now?
Absolutely. So anything that you could find on Google, any park, any restaurant, store, any space at all is also on our map. So you could actually add anything. You could add your home address. You could add a park. You could add anything.
And it's not always just about letting people know if something is A, accessible or B, inaccessible. It's also letting people know just tips and advice as to how to access, like park around back or park closest to the building, second door on the right, that type of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So beyond just letting people know, yes, it's accessible or not, there's options to actually go in and describe the kind of access that are at certain specific places. So exactly as you mentioned, is there a better parking place? Is there a side entrance that you'd have to enter through? How's the customer service at the location? Those are all parts that contribute to accessibility overall that someone like me using a wheelchair would want to know about in advance to going somewhere.
Now, Maayan, when did you create this? Did you create this while you were still doing schooling? Were you going for your undergrad?
Yeah, so I was actually doing my master's of digital media at Ryerson University, and through that program, I started this idea, started building the app, and actually launched in August, just before the Pan Am Games.
And how is it, I guess, being received? But that's, I mean, you can look directly and see how many people have the app, how many people are contributing to the app. So how's it doing?
It's doing really well. It's really exciting. You know, we've only been launched for a couple months now, and we've got a bit over 1,500 locations already. Most of them are in Toronto and surrounding areas, but we actually do have some pins in St. Catharines. We've got some stuff in Vancouver and Halifax, parts of the States already as well. And it's really, really exciting to see a community of people working together to actually help each other find the access that they need.
Well, finally, Maayan, answer me this. Has your app ever helped you?
Actually, yeah. I was invited to go to an event recently, and thought, you know what, maybe I could look it up on my app, and someone had actually added that venue to the map already, and so I was able to determine whether or not I'd have access there, which was amazing.
So it's Access Now, and how do people get this on their portable devices?
So they just have to go to AccessNow.ca, and there you go. You'll find the map right there.
And it's a free download, and you're hoping that this thing goes, North America-wide, worldwide, becomes the industry leader?
Yeah. So the mission is really to go worldwide, to be able to collect and share information all over the world so that when you go anywhere, you can find access.
And has anybody stepped up with financial support, like any big companies that are in the business of accessibility?
So that's a really interesting question, because that's actually something that I've just now begun as a new founder of a startup to look at. There haven't really been anybody writing checks yet, but there's a lot of interest. So I am absolutely hoping to collaborate and work with organizations who have the ability to help both financially and also spread the word of the project.
Yeah, I hope the database just continues to grow and grow and grow, and I would encourage everybody, whether you have a mobility issue or not, you can help grow the database. Go to AccessNow.ca and download it. The creator is, right over the lake in the GTA, Maayan Ziv. Maayan, I know you're doing a presentation tonight. Who are you presenting to?
I'm actually here in Toronto presenting at the Wellesley Institute event for Urban Health. So that's going on in about 10 minutes, actually.
All right, we'll break a leg.
Thank you very much.
Maayan Ziv is the creator of Access Now, AccessNow.ca.